Ever feel like you're living on top of a gold mine, but that gold mine is filled with dusty boxes and like holiday decorations?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're diving into how to turn that underutilized space, that basement, into a valuable extension of your home. Yes, we're talking basement finishing.
I think a lot of homeowners have that aha moment when they realize just how much potential is hiding, right below their feet.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We're going deep on all things basement finishing, starting with the planning phase.
Okay.
The source material really hammers this home.
Yeah,
A detailed plan isn't just suggested, it's practically mandatory.
rightfully so.
Yeah,
Imagine a contractor trying to build a house without blueprints. Chaos. The same principle applies to basements. Jumping into paint colors before you figured out the logistics is a recipe for disaster.
speaking of logistics, I never would have considered this,
Yeah.
but the source material Remodel Works
Yeah.
mentions having to potentially move things like water heaters.
Yeah.
Seems simple enough, but I could see how forgetting that in the planning stages could throw a wrench into things.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the unseen aspects. Moving a water heater isn't just about the appliance itself. It's about how that impacts plumbing lines, electrical wiring, even gas lines in some cases. Thinking about these things early can save you a ton of money and headaches later on.
So it sounds like having an expert like RemodelWorx involved from the beginning is crucial. They can spot these things before they become a problem, right?
Precisely. A seasoned basement renovation contractor can look at your space and immediately see the potential challenges and opportunities. They've encountered it all before, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or should I say, the sump pump.
Okay, you just reminded me we have VE to talk about moisture. This source did not hold back on how much of a potential nightmare water issues can be for a basement renovation.
Makes sense though, right? It's underground, potentially surrounded by soil and groundwater. The source really hit the nail on the head with emphasizing things like perimeter drains and foundation sealing. Those are your first line of defense against a watery disaster.
They even shared a story about a homeowner who thought they could skimp on waterproofing, ended up with a flooded basement and a mold problem that cost them a fortune to fix.
A cautionary tale, for sure. And a perfect example of why investing in proper moisture control up front is essential. It's not glamorous, but trust me, it's a lot cheaper than dealing with the consequences of ignoring it.
So let's say hypothetically I've got my moisture situation under control. What's next on the basement transformation hit list?
Let there be light. And I don't just mean a few flickering bulbs. The source is a big advocate for maximizing natural light whenever possible.
Yeah, they were really passionate about incorporating windows, which I admit never really crossed my mind for a basement. I always thought of them as kind of dark and dreary. But they're right, natural light can really elevate a space.
It's transformative. A well-placed window can make your basement feel less like a dungeon and more like, well, an actual living space. Plus, it can even increase your home's value.
Hmm.
Not to mention what it can do, for that whole like underground bunker
Yeah.
vibe that basements can sometimes have.
True that. But even with windows, the source emphasized that good artificial lighting is still key, especially for task lighting in work areas or, say, a basement kitchen.
Absolutely. Layered lighting is a game changer in any space, but especially basements. Think about it. You've got your general overhead lighting, then task lighting for specific areas, and maybe even some accent lighting to highlight architectural features or artwork.
It's all about creating that cozy, inviting atmosphere. Speaking of which, I was surprised by how much emphasis RemodelWorks put on ceiling height.
Yeah,
They really seem to favor drywalled ceilings over those dropped ceiling tiles.
there's a reason for that.
Okay.
Drywall instantly elevates the look and feel of a basement. It creates a seamless flow with the rest of your house, while those drop ceilings tend to scream, "Hey, I'm in the basement."
Plus, I imagine those extra few inches of headroom can make a huge difference, especially in the basement with lower ceilings to begin with.
Exactly. No one wants to feel claustrophobic in their newly renovated space. But, as RemodelWorks points out, it's important to consider the trade-offs. Drywall might look nicer, but it can make accessing things like plumbing or electrical wiring a bit trickier down the line.
That makes sense. So it's a balancing act between aesthetics and practicality, as with most things in life, I suppose. Okay, so we've talked lighting, ceiling height, and even banished moisture demons. What other design elements can transform a basement from drab to fab?
This is where the fun begins. Now that you've tackled the essentials, it's time to inject some personality.
Yeah.
Think about your style, your interests, and what you want to get out of the space. Do you envision a cozy reading nook with a fireplace? A state-of-the-art home gym? A playroom where the kids can run wild.
Say now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
Our source didn't get too deep into specific design trends, which I get because everyone's taste is different, but they did keep coming back to this idea of character, and I'm totally on board with that.
And that's what makes basement finishing so exciting. You're not just adding square footage, you're creating a space that's uniquely yours. Don't be afraid to experiment with different colors, textures, and materials.
Okay, so now I'm picturing exposed brick walls, maybe some reclaimed wood accents, a funky light fixture.
I love where your head's at. And don't forget about all those little details that make a space feel homey. Throw pillows, area rugs, artwork. Those finishing touches can really bring it all together.
Speaking of bringing it all together,
Yeah.
what about those awkward structural elements that basements often have, like support beams or exposed ductwork? Any advice on how to work with those rather than trying to hide them? I've always thought of those features as like design challenges, but you're right, they can totally be assets.
Absolutely. Exposed beams can add a rustic industrial vibe. You could paint them a contrasting color to make them pop, or even wrap them in fairy lights for a whimsical touch. Then exposed ductwork. Hello, urban chic.
See, this is why I love having an expert on board. You're turning my basement dilemmas into design inspiration. Now, one area our source touched on that seems tailor-made for embracing character and design is a basement home theater. We talked a bit about the technical must-haves, but let's dive into the fun part, the design choices that make it feel like a true cinematic escape.
This is where you can really let your imagination run wild. First things first, seating is paramount. We're not talking folding chairs here. Think luxurious recliners, plush couches, maybe even some tiered platforms for that stadium seating feel.
Okay, now I'm picturing those home theaters you see in magazines with velvet curtains, star-studded
So
ceiling.
exactly, why not? It's your own personal oasis away from the world. Don't hold back. Think about incorporating rich colors, plush textures, and dramatic lighting.
Speaking of lighting, our source was strangely silent on that front. I'm assuming we're not aiming for a brightly lit operating room vibe when we're trying to watch a movie, right?
You're catching on. Lighting is crucial for setting the mood in a home theater. Ditch the harsh overhead lights and opt for dimmable sconces or even LED strip lighting that you can adjust to create the perfect ambiance. And don't forget about blackout curtains. They're essential for blocking out any unwanted light and really maximizing that movie magic.
Okay, I am sold. So we've covered everything from banishing moisture to embracing those unique basement quirks. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are now itching to transform their own underutilized spaces?
Basement renovations can feel daunting, but remember, it's all about breaking it down into manageable steps. Start with a solid plan, tackle those essential moisture control measures, and then let your creativity shine.
This has been such a journey. Who knew there was so much to learn about finishing a basement?
It's a hidden world full of potential.
It really is. And the best part is you get to create a space that's uniquely yours, a reflection of your style, your passions, and your vision. So to our listeners, I say go forth and conquer those basements. We can't wait to hear about the amazing spaces you create.